I'm Marceline, 29, from a suburb in Michigan where maple trees line pristine streets and expectations run high. I always thought family meant unconditional love, until that Thursday night dinner changed everything. The crystal glasses clinked, congratulations flowed from my brother's news. Then suddenly my father's voice cut through the celebration. "You have 2 days to get your stuff out." I sat frozen fork midair as my carefully constructed world shattered. If you've ever had your family pull the rug from under you, you know that feeling. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch. Growing up in our colonial-style home in suburban Michigan, I learned early that love came with conditions. My father Thomas built his career as a financial executive, working 60-hour weeks and expecting nothing less than excellence from his children. My mother Eleanor, a former beauty queen who gave up her modeling career to raise us, channeled her perfectionism into creating an immaculate home and equally flawless children. Then there was my older brother Aaron, the golden child, star quarterback valedictorian, and now a successful surgeon with the perfect wife. No matter what I achieved, it somehow fell short of Aaron's accomplishments. I still remember bringing home my first straight-A report card in 4th grade, proudly displaying it at the dinner table. My father glanced at it briefly and said, "Good, keep it up," then immediately turned to Aaron to discuss his latest football victory. That pattern continued through high school, college, and into my career. Despite this, I excelled. I graduated with honors from University of Michigan with a marketing degree and landed a job at a prestigious firm in Chicago. For 5 years, I built my career, finally feeling like I was creating my own identity outside my family's shadow. I called home weekly, visited on holidays, and sent thoughtful gifts, still seeking that elusive parental approval. Then the recession hit. My company downsized, and my entire department was eliminated. After 3 months of unsuccessful job hunting and depleting my savings, I swallowed my pride and called my parents. "Of course you can come home until you get back on your feet," my mother said, though her tone suggested I had somehow failed where others had succeeded. Moving back at 29 felt like regression. My childhood bedroom remained mostly unchanged, except my mother had repurposed half of it for her sewing projects. The first night back, my father handed me a printed list of house rules. Curfew at 11. No guests without prior approval. Contribution to utilities and groceries expected. Weekly updates on my job search progress. "We're not running a charity here," he explained. "This is temporary assistance, not an open-ended arrangement." I nodded gratefully, telling myself it was just for a short time. But weeks turned into months. The job market remained brutal, especially in our area. When I did get interviews, they offered salaries that couldn't cover both rent and student loans in Michigan's surprisingly expensive housing market. My mother began each morning with subtle digs about my job search. "Patty Wilson's daughter found a position within 2 weeks of looking," or "Have you considered settling for something below your qualifications just to get your foot in the door somewhere?" Each dinner became an informal performance review of my life choices. Why hadn't I pursued the stable healthcare field like Aaron? Why was I still single when most of my cousins were married with children? Had I considered that my wardrobe might be too casual for interviews, I applied for 73 jobs in 3 months. I had 11 interviews and 3 second-round interviews, but no offers. Each rejection chipped away at my confidence, especially with my parents' daily scrutiny. I was grateful for the roof over my head, but increasingly resentful of the emotional tax that came with it. The fateful dinner happened on the last Thursday of April. Monthly formal family dinners were my mother's tradition, a holdover from her own upbringing and what she called proper society. Even living under the same roof, we were expected to dress for the occasion. I chose a navy blue dress I'd worn to countless job interviews, hoping it would signal my continued professionalism despite my unemployment. My mother spent the entire day preparing, scrubbing the already spotless dining room and polishing the silver that only emerged for these occasions. The tension in her movements told me something significant was happening tonight, but she deflected my offers to help with terse instructions to make yourself presentable. At precisely 6:30, the doorbell rang. Aaron and his wife Stephanie arrived, both still in their professional attire. Aaron in his surgeon's confidence, Stephanie glowing in an expensive cream dress that highlighted her perfect posture from years of ballet training. They brought an expensive bottle of wine, which my father immediately praised for its vintage. Marceline set the table, my mother announced as we settled in the dining room, her way of acknowledging my minimal contribution. The first course was served with practiced precision, my mother's butternut squash soup that she only made for special occasions. The conversation flowed around hospital politics and neighborhood gossip, while I tried to contribute meaningfully despite having little to report from my own life. As my mother served the main course, prime rib with roasted vegetables, Aaron cleared his throat and reached for Stephanie's hand. "We actually have some news to share," he said, his smile widening. "We're pregnant. You're going to be grandparents," my mother gasped dramatically. Tears immediately forming. My father stood up so quickly, his chair nearly toppled backward, moving around the table to clap Aaron on the shoulder and embrace Stephanie with uncharacteristic emotion. "My boy." "Carrying on the family name," my father exclaimed, disappearing into the cellar and returning with champagne he'd apparently been saving for a truly special occasion. I smiled, genuinely happy for my brother despite the familiar pang of inadequacy. "I'm going to be an aunt," I said, reaching across to squeeze Stephanie's hand. "Congratulations, you two will be amazing parents." For 20 minutes, the conversation swirled excitedly around due dates and nursery colors. My mother was already planning a baby shower, and my father launched into his hopes for his grandson's future in finance or medicine. "We don't actually know the gender yet," Stephanie gently corrected, but my father waved dismissively. "A boy. First grandchildren are always boys in the Johnson family," he declared with unearned certainty. As dessert was served, my mother turned to me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "And how's the job search coming along, Marceline? Any promising leads?" The abrupt spotlight felt like a stage light suddenly blinding me. "I had a second interview at Davis Marketing last week," I said, trying to infuse optimism into my voice. "They said they'll make a decision by next Friday." "That's the problem with your generation," my father interjected. "Too much waiting around for the perfect opportunity instead of creating your own path." Before I could defend myself, my mother jumped in. "Speaking of changes, we've made a decision about the house," she announced, dabbing her lips with her napkin. "Now that a grandchild is coming, we're going to convert your bedroom into a proper nursery." I nodded slowly, assuming this meant relocating me to the smaller guest room. "I can move my things tomorrow if you'd like to get started." My father set down his fork with a deliberate clink against fine china. "No, Marceline. What your mother means is that it's time for you to find your own place. You have 2 days to get your stuff out." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. I sat, frozen fork suspended halfway to my mouth, a piece of chocolate cake suddenly looking alien and unappetizing. "But my voice faltered, barely a whisper. "I don't have anywhere to go yet. Or a job. You've had months to figure this out," my mother said, her voice gentle but unyielding. "We've been more than generous. But with the baby coming, we need to prepare. Aaron and Stephanie will need a proper place to stay when they visit with the little one." I looked to my brother, hoping for support, but he studied his dessert intently, discomfort evident in his tightened jaw. Stephanie at least had the decency to look embarrassed. "This is what you need," my father continued, his tone suggesting he was doing me a favor. "A push out of the nest. Your brother was living independently at 23. The room seemed to spin slightly as blood rushed in my ears. My mother continued talking about nursery colors while my father poured more champagne. The celebration continued around me while I sat perfectly still, trying to process how quickly I'd gone from family member to inconvenient houseguest. "Would you excuse me for a moment?" I finally managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I walked calmly to the bathroom, closed the door quietly, then sank to the cold tile floor as panic overtook me. My breathing came in short, painful gasps. 2 days. 48 hours to find housing in a market where even tiny apartments required first and last month's rent, plus security deposit money I simply didn't have. The room seemed to shrink around me as memories flashed through my mind. My 16th birthday when my father missed my dance recital for a business dinner, but rearranged his entire schedule the following week for Aaron's football game. My college graduation when my mother's first comment was about my weight in the photos, rather than my summa cum laude honors. The countless times I'd edited myself, shrunk myself, molded myself, trying to fit their expectations. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and started making calls. My friend Jasmine couldn't help her one-bedroom already crowded with her boyfriend and dog. Mark was in the process of moving himself. 3 other friends expressed sympathy, but had no solutions. Finally, I called Taylor, a former coworker who'd moved to Michigan after we were both laid off. 2 days. That's insane, she said after I explained my situation. Look, my place is tiny, but my couch is yours until you figure something out. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. I can't even tell you how much this means. After splashing cold water on my face and practicing a neutral expression in the mirror, I returned to the dining table where dessert was finishing. No one acknowledged my extended absence. So we're thinking sage green for the nursery, my mother was saying. Gender neutral, but still classic. I nodded and smiled automatically, going through the motions of normalcy, while my mind raced with logistics. How would I transport my belongings? What could I realistically take with limited space at Taylor's apartment? What would happen to the childhood mementos my parents had already relegated to the attic? The remainder of the evening passed in a surreal blur. Aaron and Stephanie left with warm hugs and promises to send ultrasound pictures. My mother began clearing dishes, humming contentedly. My father retreated to his study with a nightcap, the matter of my impending homelessness, apparently resolved to his satisfaction. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sorted through 29 years of existence, deciding what fit into 2 suitcases and a few boxes. My marketing textbooks and portfolio. The quilt my grandmother made before she passed. Photos and small keepsakes that represented who I was beyond being Thomas and Eleanor Johnson's disappointing daughter. As I folded clothes and wrapped small trinkets in tissue paper, a realization dawned slowly, but with absolute clarity. I had spent my entire life trying to earn the approval of people who had already decided I wasn't quite good enough. No achievement would ever change that fundamental assessment. The problem wasn't my failure to meet their standards, but their inability to see my worth on my own terms. Morning brought exhaustion, but also an unexpected email notification. In the chaos of the previous evening, I'd completely forgotten about an interview I'd had 2 weeks prior with a small nonprofit called Women's Rise. The message was brief. We'd love to meet for a second conversation. Are you available this morning at 10? It was already 8:30. The nonprofit's office was downtown, at least 40 minutes away in morning traffic. I hadn't prepared, hadn't researched further questions, hadn't slept. But what did I have to lose? I replied immediately, I'll be there. Thank you for the opportunity. After the quickest shower of my life, and throwing on my interview outfit, I grabbed my portfolio and headed out. My mother was in the kitchen, calmly sipping tea and browsing baby furniture catalogs. I have a second interview, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. I'll continue packing when I return. She looked up with mild surprise. That's good timing, isn't it? Perhaps everything happens for a reason. I bit back a retort about their reason being Aaron's baby, rather than my well-being, grabbed my car keys and left without another word. Traffic was worse than expected. By the time I found parking near the modest office building that housed Women's Rise, I was 7 minutes late and visibly flustered. The receptionist, an older woman with kind eyes, led me to a small conference room where a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense pantsuit waited. Marceline Johnson, I'm Sandra Diaz, Executive Director, she said, extending her hand. Thank you for coming in on such short notice. Thank you for the opportunity, I said, trying to steady my voice. I apologize for being late. Sandra waved dismissively. Traffic downtown is its own special nightmare. I'm just glad you made it. She began by explaining more about the nonprofit's mission supporting women in crisis situations, particularly those facing housing insecurity, domestic violence, or workplace discrimination. As she detailed their need for improved marketing and outreach, I tried to focus, but the irony of discussing housing insecurity while facing my own impending homelessness made concentration difficult. "Ms. Johnson, are you all right?" Sandra's voice cut through my thoughts. "You seem distracted." Something in her direct but compassionate tone broke through my professional facade. To my horror, tears welled up in my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said, trying to blink them away. "It's been a challenging 24 hours. Family issues. But I'm very interested in the position and capable of handling the responsibilities." Sandra studied me for a long moment, then pushed aside her folder of interview questions. "Look, we all have lives outside these interview rooms. Sometimes those lives get messy. Would it help to talk about what's going on off the record?" The unexpected kindness from this stranger cracked the last of my composure. Before I could stop myself, I was explaining my situation, the ultimatum, my scramble for housing, and the lifetime of conditional love that preceded it. When I finished, embarrassed by my unprofessional outburst, Sandra didn't look shocked or uncomfortable. Instead, she nodded with understanding. "20 years ago, I was you," she said quietly. "Different circumstances, but the same fundamental experience of having the rug pulled out from under me by people who should have been my safety net. That's actually why I started Women's Rise." She rose and poured 2 cups of water from a pitcher in the corner. "Here's what I know about you from our first interview, and your resume. You're skilled, dedicated, and creative. What I know about you now is that you're resilient and honest even when it's difficult." Sandra sat back down, her expression thoughtful. "Our marketing coordinator position needs someone who understands crisis, not just theoretically, but viscerally. Someone who can communicate our mission with authenticity, because they recognize its importance." She pulled out a contract from her drawer. "The position is yours if you want it. We can't match corporate salaries, but we offer flexible hours and purpose-driven work. We can also arrange an advance on your first paycheck to help with immediate housing needs." I stared at her in disbelief. Just like that. Even after my emotional display, Sandra smiled. "Because of it, not despite it. And I have another resource that might help. We partner with a women's housing cooperative that offers reduced rent for women in transition. It's simple living but safe and supportive. I can make a call this afternoon if you're interested." For the first time in months, perhaps years, I felt a glimmer of genuine hope. Not the conditional approval I'd sought from my parents, but the recognition of my value as a person worthy of support. "Yes," I said firmly, "to both offers. Thank you." Walking out of the Women's Rise office 2 hours later with employment paperwork and housing information in hand, I felt something shift fundamentally inside me. The crisis my parents had created had accidentally connected me with exactly the people I needed to meet doing work that suddenly seemed more meaningful than any corporate position I'd previously pursued. When I returned to my parents' house that afternoon, I discovered they hadn't waited for me to begin the removal process. My belongings had been boxed up, some carefully, others haphazardly, and relocated to the garage, a space already being cleared for baby furniture and decor. My mother was directing my father on where to place a newly delivered rocking chair in what had been my bedroom until yesterday. She noticed me standing in the doorway and smiled brightly. "Oh, good, you're back. The delivery men brought the nursery furniture earlier than expected. Isn't it beautiful solid oak, just like Aaron had as a baby?" I stood silently taking in the scene. My childhood bedroom already transforming my existence there, being erased with efficiency. "I've organized your things in the garage," she continued, seemingly oblivious to the symbolism of literally putting me out with the stored holiday decorations and forgotten exercise equipment. "I kept everything important, though some of your old school papers seemed unnecessary to keep." My father appeared from the adjoining bathroom, where he'd apparently been measuring for some installation. "Did the interview pan out? You need to be realistic about your options, Marceline. The job market doesn't reward waiting for the perfect position." Something about his lecturing tone while standing in the room they'd evicted me from ignited a calm, cold anger inside me. For 29 years, I'd swallowed my responses, always afraid of rocking the boat of being seen as difficult or ungrateful. Not today. "Actually, I accepted a position this morning," I said evenly. with Women's Rise, a nonprofit supporting women in crisis, particularly those facing unexpected housing insecurity. My mother's smile faltered slightly at my pointed reference. Well, that's wonderful news. See, our little push is already helping you land on your feet. It's not a push when you're shoving someone off a cliff, I replied, still maintaining an even tone. It's abandonment. And it's only the latest in a lifetime of conditional love and impossible standards. My father's face reddened. Now wait just a minute. We've supported you your entire life. Paid for your education, gave you a place to stay when you hit a rough patch. This kind of dramatic overreaction is exactly why you need to learn independence. Support isn't just financial, Dad. It's emotional. It's believing in someone's worth even when they stumble. It's what you've always given Aaron, but withheld from me. I needed parents, not performance evaluators. My mother stepped between us, her hands fluttering nervously. Marceline, you're upset, and not thinking clearly. We've only ever wanted what's best for you. What's best for me, or what's most convenient for you? I asked, surprised by my own clarity. You're converting my room for a grandchild who won't even live here when you have 2 other spare bedrooms in this house. This isn't about space, it's about priorities. I've never been one of yours. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. When I graduated with honors, Dad's first question was why I wasn't valedictorian like Aaron. When I got my first promotion, Mom, you asked why I wasn't dating anyone from the office. When I lost my job due to company-wide layoffs, you both treated it as a personal failure. Nothing I do is ever quite enough. My father's expression hardened. If you're just going to be ungrateful and make accusations, perhaps it's better you leave sooner rather than later. I agree, I said calmly. But I want to be very clear about something. I'm not leaving because you're kicking me out. I'm leaving because I'm choosing a healthier environment for myself, and I'm setting boundaries for our relationship moving forward. My mother looked genuinely confused. Boundaries. What are you talking about? I mean that I'll no longer accept being treated as less valuable than Aaron. I won't tolerate comparisons or criticism disguised as concern. I won't be made to feel that my worth is tied to your approval. And until you can respect that, I'll be limiting our contact. Later that evening, Aaron called, clearly having been briefed by our parents. Don't you think you're being a bit harsh? They're getting older and they're excited about becoming grandparents. I'm happy for you and Stephanie, I said sincerely. But my relationship with Mom and Dad isn't your business, just like yours isn't mine. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm just no longer willing to be the family scapegoat. Nobody sees you that way, he protested, but without conviction. You don't see it because you benefit from it, I replied. But I'm done playing that role. When I finished loading the last of my boxes into my car the next morning, I took a final walk through the house where I'd grown up. Not to reminisce, but to make peace with leaving it behind. I placed my house key on the kitchen counter next to a note with my new phone number and a simple message. When you're ready to build a relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be ready to talk. I didn't slam doors or raise my voice as I left. The dramatic exit they probably expected would have played into their narrative of me being emotional and irrational. Instead, I walked out with dignity, closing that chapter of my life with quiet determination rather than theatrical flourish. The first weeks of my new life were undeniably difficult. Taylor's apartment was cramped, her couch unforgiving on my back. Most of my possessions remained in boxes stacked against her living room wall. But each morning I woke with a sense of purpose that had been missing during my months of unemployment at my parents' house. Women's Rise operated on a shoestring budget from a modest office, but the work immediately felt meaningful. My first assignment was redesigning their outdated website to better connect women in crisis with resources. Each testimonial I incorporated into the design reminded me that my situation, while painful, was far from the most challenging circumstances women faced. Sandra proved to be both a demanding boss and a supportive mentor. She pushed me to apply my corporate marketing skills to nonprofit outreach while providing insight into the emotional aspects of our clients' experiences. The difference between sympathy and empathy is lived experience, she told me during my first week. Use yours as a strength, not a weakness. After 3 weeks on Taylor's couch, I moved into the women's housing cooperative Sandra had recommended. Wildflower House was a large Victorian home divided into single rooms with shared common spaces. My room was tiny but private with a window overlooking a community garden. The monthly rent was manageable on my nonprofit salary, and the environment offered something I'd rarely experienced: unconditional support. The 12 women living at Wildflower came from diverse backgrounds, but shared the experience of rebuilding their lives. Janine was leaving an abusive marriage. Keisha was recovering from addiction while working toward regaining custody of her children. Maria was a recent immigrant establishing her independence. Their resilience humbled and inspired me daily. Our house meetings every Sunday evening became a source of strength. We shared challenges and victories, offering practical help and emotional encouragement without judgment. For perhaps the first time, I experienced what family could and should be: a community that celebrated your successes without keeping score and supported your struggles without assigning blame. 6 months after the family dinner that changed everything, my professional life had transformed. The website redesign increased our nonprofit's donations by 37%. My outreach campaign connecting local businesses with our job placement program won regional recognition. Sandra promoted me to communications director with a modest raise that allowed me to start rebuilding my savings. My parents made sporadic attempts to reconnect, always on their terms. My mother sent holiday cards with brief notes about family news, primarily focused on Aaron and Stephanie's pregnancy progress. My father called occasionally, our conversations stiff and surface level, never acknowledging the elephant in the room. Aaron surprisingly began to develop a relationship with me independent of our parents. After Stephanie gave birth to their daughter Emma, he called me directly. "Would you want to meet your niece?" he asked tentatively. "Just us at the park or something?" That meeting became a monthly tradition. Watching Aaron with his daughter revealed a gentleness I'd never seen in him before. And as Emma grew, his perspective on our parents began shifting. "Mom criticized how Stephanie was dressing Emma," he mentioned during one visit. "Said she should be in more feminine colors. It really upset Steph." Now imagine hearing that kind of criticism about every aspect of your life for 29 years, I replied without bitterness. He nodded slowly. "I'm starting to see what you meant." Therapy became another cornerstone of my rebuilding process. Weekly sessions with Dr. Reeves helped me untangle the complex web of family dynamics that had shaped my self-perception. I learned to recognize my reflexive need for approval and develop tools to validate my own worth instead of seeking it externally. My first Thanksgiving away from family tradition felt both liberating and disorienting. The women at Wildflower organized a potluck dinner, each contributing dishes from their cultural backgrounds. I brought my grandmother's sweet potato casserole, the one recipe my mother had never quite perfected. Surrounded by this chosen family laughing and sharing stories, I realized I wasn't missing out on tradition, I was creating a healthier one. 1 year after being told to get my stuff out, I stood in the center of my new apartment, a modest one-bedroom I'd furnished piece by piece from thrift stores and occasional splurges. The walls displayed framed photography I'd taken during weekend hikes, a hobby I'd discovered through my new friend circle. The bookshelves held volumes I actually read rather than displayed for impression. Everything in the space reflected my authentic self, not the person I'd tried to be to earn approval. The promotion to communications director had come with enough of a raise to afford this independent living space. My work at Women's Rise continued to be challenging and fulfilling in equal measure. We'd recently secured a major grant to expand our housing assistance program, a project I'd helped develop based partly on my own experience. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I ran into my mother at Wilson's Grocery. I'd turned down another corner when I saw her familiar figure examining produce, but she spotted me before I could retreat. "Marceline," she said, sounding genuinely surprised. "It's good to see you." "Hello, Mom," I replied, keeping my tone neutral but not cold. We stood awkwardly in the produce section, shopping baskets in hand, the mundane setting highlighting the abnormality of our estrangement. "You look well," she offered. "Healthy." "Thank you. I am well." She shifted her weight from one foot to another. "Emma is walking now. She's quite the little explorer. I know. Aaron brings her to the park to meet me once a month. She's wonderful. Surprise flickered across my mother's face. He didn't mention that. Maybe he didn't want to be in the middle, I suggested gently. She nodded, then seemed to gather her courage. Your father and I have been talking. We thought perhaps you might come for dinner sometime. Nothing formal, just family. The old Marceline would have jumped at this olive branch, eager to be welcomed back into the fold at any cost. The woman I'd become considered it more carefully. I appreciate the invitation, I said truthfully, but I need to know it would be different this time. I can't go back to how things were. My mother's eyes glistened slightly. We miss you. I miss aspects of our relationship too, I acknowledged. But I don't miss feeling constantly judged and found wanting. Any relationship we rebuild has to be based on mutual respect. We always respected you, she protested weakly. Respect isn't just politeness, Mom. It's valuing someone for who they are, not who you wish they were. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, What would that look like to you? It was the first genuine question she'd asked about my needs in as long as I could remember. It would look like listening without immediately offering solutions or comparisons, celebrating my choices even when they're different from what you'd choose, treating me as an adult with valid perspectives rather than a child who needs direction. That sounds complicated, she admitted. Relationships are complicated, I agreed, but worth the effort when both people are committed to making them healthy. We parted with a tentative plan to meet for coffee the following week. Not a full reconciliation, but a first step towards something new. My father proved more resistant to change. When I finally agreed to visit their home 3 months later, he oscillated between awkward formality and attempts to give unsolicited career advice. But even he eventually acknowledged during a rare moment of vulnerability, while showing me his newly built workshop, I may not have always understood your choices, but I see now that you're building a life that works for you. The journey toward healing family wounds wasn't linear. There were still difficult conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, and occasions when I needed to reinforce boundaries. But with time and consistent effort on both sides, we began establishing a new kind of relationship, one based on who we actually were rather than who we'd expected each other to be. The most unexpected outcome of my family crisis was the support group I started at Women's Rise for Adults, dealing with family estrangement or difficult family relationships. Twice monthly, we gathered to share experiences and coping strategies. The group quickly became one of our most attended programs, revealing how many people struggled with similar family dynamics but rarely discussed them openly. You've turned your pain into purpose, Sandra observed after sitting in on a particularly powerful session. That's true resilience. On the 1-year anniversary of my independence, I hosted a small dinner party in my apartment. My guests included Taylor, who'd supported me at my lowest point, Sandra, who'd given me professional purpose, 2 close friends from Wildflower House, and somewhat surprisingly, Aaron, Stephanie, and baby Emma. As we shared a meal around my thrift store dining table, I couldn't help but contrast the warm, accepting atmosphere with the tense, formal dinners of my childhood. Here, conversation flowed naturally. Laughter came easily. No one kept score of achievements or subtly undermined others' confidence. A toast, Aaron said, unexpectedly raising his glass. To my sister, who had the courage to break patterns I didn't even recognize until she pointed them out. You've changed our family for the better, and I hope Emma grows up with your strength. Later that night, after my guests had left, I stood at my window looking out at the city lights. The journey from that devastating family dinner to this moment had been painful but necessary. Being pushed out of what I thought was my safety net had forced me to build something stronger, more authentic, and ultimately more nurturing. The truth I discovered was bittersweet, but liberating. Sometimes losing what you thought you needed makes room for what you truly deserve. Family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by love, respect, and mutual support. I'd lost one version of family but gained a more meaningful definition in the process. If you're facing your own family crossroads right now, Remember that your worth isn't determined by others' assessment of you. Where do you find your sense of belonging? Has a painful rejection ever led you to something better? Share your experience in the comments below. And remember to subscribe for more stories about finding strength through life's unexpected challenges. Your story matters, and someone out there needs to hear they're not alone in their journey, just as I once did.